So here, Isaiah is speaking of the remnant of Israel in the new millennium period after being saved, in the flesh. He's speaking of those that remain in Jerusalem. And he's saying in verse 4 that he washes away all their filth. And 5, that he will create a dwelling place on Mount Zion. And above the dwelling place is a cloud and smoke by day. Cloud hovering above. Smoky cloud. But at night, it shines as a flaming fire. This is a covering over that Jerusalem. And it is also a defense, because Jerusalem is a city that would be under siege, because his dominion has not yet extended all around the earth. The law has to go forth from Zion, Isaiah chapter 2. So at this stage, this is the beginning of him setting up his kingdom. And the earthly Jerusalem with the Israelites, and above the cloud, and at night the shining glory. And he creates a defense around this earthly Jerusalem, so that no one can enter in these gates. These gates are all secured. Only certain people are allowed, certain Levites are allowed, and primarily the sons of Zadok, who are the ones who did not defile themselves with idols in the desert. And reading in verse 6, and there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat. So there's a covering as a shadow in the daytime to cover the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain. So there's actually a covering over this earthly Jerusalem. See that? And back into Ezekiel. Did you keep your finger in Ezekiel? Chapter 44. And we see in verse 2, this gate shall be shut. There's a gate on the east, and it's shut. And no man shall enter in it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. So only the Lord can enter into this east gate, with one exception. Verse 3, it is for the prince. The prince, he shall sit in it to eat bread before the Lord. There is a prince established over Israel at the east gate who can eat bread when the Lord comes through the east gate and visits with him at certain times. He sups with Israel. And we see in verse 4 that looking through the north gate, he saw, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord, and I fell upon my face. So we see this place is prepared, and the glory of the Lord now is able to fill it. Who is this prince? Let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 34. Good guess. But I remind you that when Jesus returns, he comes as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Could he be a prince as well? So Ezekiel 34, verse 23. And I will set up one shepherd over them, speaking of Israel, and he shall feed them, even my servant David. He shall feed them, and he shall be their shepherd. And I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David a prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken it. David is the prince, and he is able to be at the east gate and enter in. And when the Lord comes in through the east gate to visit, David can have bread with him. Now, is it the Lord, our Father, who comes through the east gate, or is it our Lord Jesus Christ who comes in through the east gate to be with David? Go ahead, I hear some good answers. Who is it?
Jesus.
Jesus. Because the earth is still not a place that's prepared and ready yet for the Father to come. That comes at the end of the 1,000 years in 1 Corinthians 15:52, when Jesus returns all power and authority back to the Father. So he, being the mediator, the atonement, he's the one who reconciles people to God. His ministry for that 1,000 years is to prepare the earth to be ready for the return of the Father, that he may be all in all. So this is Jesus that comes in through the east gate. Very good. We see back in Ezekiel 45, that the Levitical priesthood has to go back to the type and shadow of former things. In Zechariah 13, you don't have to go there, but in Zechariah 13, they recognize this man of their own tribe with the imprints and the wounds in his side. And they mourn for him as one of their own. So when Jesus returns, at that time the blindness will be lifted from the overall nation of Israel, and many will mourn as they mourn for their own son. And because they didn't have the same privilege that we have, which is to be prepared now, to be baptized, to be following the commandments, the testimony of Jesus Christ, Revelation 14:12, and to be caught and changed as saints, and to be under, for us, the high priesthood of the Melchizedek order, the greater and first priesthood. All the things of the Levites, they're still in that fleshly state, and they still have to fulfill all these things for the millennial period as they come to be reconciled back to Jesus. Because even though his blood has been an atonement for us forever, for them, they have to go through all the type and foreshadowing. So, we see in verse 17 that it's the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings and the feasts and new moons and Sabbaths. All the sacrificial works are reinstituted for the Levitical priesthood in the earthly Jerusalem, in the earthly temple. While above there is this a cloud and covering and shining, which I submit to you as a new Jerusalem hovering above the earthly Jerusalem.